6:45, this is the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. The news edited by Danushka Madhavala, read by Soundithavam. Israel and Sri Lanka have inked a direct air service agreement. The central bank says Sri Lanka's inflation expected to hit 5% in the medium term. It is stressed that the new economic reforms are politically unpopular but vital for future prosperity. Parliament to meet 3 days next week. Unethical professional conduct is vehemently denounced. In foreign news, Democrats relieved as Manchin rules out White House bid. And in sports, the first T20 international between Afghanistan and Sri Lanka will be played today. The Ports, Shipping and Aviation Minister Nimal Siripala de Silva announced the signing of a direct air service agreement between Israel and Sri Lanka yesterday. Speaking at a press briefing themed Collective Path to a Stable Country at the President's Media Centre, Minister De Silva highlighted the agreement's focus on preventing delays in Sri Lankan workers' migration abroad. Quoting the minister, the agreement signed between the Israeli Ministry of Transport and our Ministry of Ports, Shipping and Aviation marks the beginning of direct flights between Israel and Sri Lanka, aiming to enhance passenger convenience. He further elaborated on the agreement's objective of facilitating prompt overseas employment for Sri Lankan workers and noted the interest of many Israelis in visiting Sri Lanka. Meanwhile, the minister also said negotiations have commenced with Indigo Airlines to introduce an additional daily flight service to India via the Palali airport. Furthermore, an expression of interest has been called for the development of the Mattala airport. Following the selection of an investor by the tender board, negotiations are nearing conclusion, with the possibility of reaching an agreement next week. This endeavour, proposed as a joint Russian and Indian private project, holds the potential to render the airport profitable. In response to traffic congestion at the Katunayaka airport, plans are underway to introduce 31 ticket windows and a new terminal building, with construction slated to begin within 2 weeks, the minister explained. The central bank said in its latest monetary policy report that Sri Lanka's annual economic growth is expected to remain positive in 2024 and gradually reach its potential over the medium term. The document, published on Thursday, provides forward-looking insights about the economy, particularly in terms of inflation and economic growth. It also aims to provide an assessment of risks to the projections on inflation and economic growth, considering the ongoing and expected developments in the domestic and global fronts. The country successfully reduced its inflation rate to a single-digit level in 2023 and restored price stability after containing the historically highest inflation observed in 2022, the central bank said, adding that inflation is projected to stabilize around the targeted level of 5% year-on-year over the medium term. Although inflation may deviate from the target in the near term, mainly due to the recent amendments to the value-added tax and supply-side disruptions, the central bank said such an impact is likely to be short-lived. The President's senior advisor on national security and the chief of the presidential staff, Sagala Ratnayake, highlighted that many long-neglected economic reforms essential for the country's progress are now being implemented under President Ranil Wickremesinghe's leadership. He emphasized that past decisions driven solely by electoral considerations had led to economic setbacks. He noted that the current government's reforms, though not immediately yielding results, will benefit the youth and future generations. These comments were made by Sagala Ratnayake during an awareness conference on the 2024 budget proposals held at the main auditorium of the District Secretariat, Matara, recently. The event was organized by the Presidential Trade Union Relations Division. Sagala Ratnayake highlighted that while the country's economy has stabilized, the income of the people has not kept pace with the rising cost of living. Consequently, the government is actively pursuing reforms across all sectors to provide maximum relief to the people. He emphasized that the modernization of the agricultural sector will significantly boost the people's income levels. This news broadcast comes to you from the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. The Committee on Parliamentary Business, which met on Thursday under the chairmanship of Speaker Mahindayapa Abeyewardena, has decided to convene the parliamentary sittings on 3 days next week, that's on the 20th, 21st and 22nd of February. However, Parliament will not meet on Friday, as it is a Poya day. Despite economic challenges, the government has endeavoured to grant a living expenses allowance of 10,000 rupees to government employees. The chairman of the Sectoral Monitoring Committee for an Open and Responsible Government and Member of Parliament Jagat Kumara Sumitra Rachi emphasized the importance of the health trade unions refraining from striking in a manner that adversely affects the patients' lives. The chairman of the Sectoral Oversight Committee for an Open and Responsible Government highlighted that progress in the country cannot solely rely on accusing public representatives in Parliament. He emphasized that government officials are equally responsible for delivering efficient and accountable services to the people. He made these comments during a press conference at the Presidential Media Centre held yesterday under the theme Collective Path to a Stable Country. That concludes local news.
The main news story is brought to you by Sinhala Vedamahatmya.
The National Physical Planning Department has designated 11 temples of significant archaeological, historical and sacred importance as sacred sites in the Government Gazette. These areas are now recognized as sacred sites, had their respective documents submitted to the Presidential Secretariat on Thursday, presided over by the Secretary to the President Saman Ekanayake. As a result, the count of sanctuaries recognized as sacred places of worship in Sri Lanka has now risen to 142. The President's Secretary Saman Ekanayake affirmed President Ranil Wickremesinghe's unwavering commitment to upholding and protecting Buddhism in accordance with the Constitution. Additionally, the Secretary to the President highlighted various government initiatives aimed at advancing Buddhism guided by the President's directives and came to you in the main news story.
The main news story was brought to you by Sinhala Vedamahatmya.
Moving on to Watchlight, the National Water Supply and Drainage Board announced that a 16-hour water cut will be imposed in some parts of Colombo today. According to the Water Board, the water supply will be disrupted from 5 p.m. today until 9 a.m. tomorrow, Sunday. The water cut will be imposed in the Colombo 11, 12, 13, 14 and 15 during this period and came to you in Watchlight.
Coming up, World News.
Making headlines this morning, Democrats relieved as Manchin rules out White House bid. Satellite images show construction on Egypt's border. And India opposition party claims bank accounts frozen. When Joe Manchin, one of the most high-profile centrists in U.S. politics, announced he would not be running for president on Friday, you could almost hear the sigh of relief from the Biden campaign. The West Virginia senator had said he was considering a run to provide an alternative to voters unhappy with both Joe Biden and Donald Trump. The self-described conservative Democrat has criticized both major parties and their leaders in recent years. Democrats were concerned that an independent bid could help deliver the White House to the Republicans in November's election. Mr. Manchin finally ended the speculation on Friday and seemed to acknowledge that the prospect of such unintended consequences was a factor in his decision not to run. Quoting him, "I will not be a deal-breaker or a spoiler," he said in a speech in his home state. Satellite images appear to show extensive construction work in progress along India's border with Gaza, the area which reports claim is being carried out in preparation for housing Palestinian refugees. Unnamed Egyptian sources reportedly said the work is being done in order to set up an isolated buffer zone. This area, containing a walled enclosure in Egypt's North Sinai province, in case Israel goes ahead with its planned ground offensive in Gaza's southmost city Rafah. According to a report published by a human rights group, 7-meter-high walls are being constructed in the zone. Egypt has publicly denied making any such preparations. The Defense Minister Yoav Gallant also said Israel has no intention of evacuating Palestinian civilians to Egypt. India's main opposition Congress party says its bank accounts have been frozen by the Income Tax Department just months before the country holds general elections. The party later said that IT officials had given them access to funds in the accounts pending a hearing in court. Congress leader Mallikarjun Kharge called the freezing of funds as an assault on democracy. The government or the IT department have not responded to the allegations. Congress leader Ajay Makan told reporters on Friday morning that the party had been informed 2 days ago that the checks it was issuing were not being honoured by banks. On investigating, the party was told that all its accounts had been frozen. Back to the headlines of the world news. Democrats relieved as Manchin rules out White House bid. Satellite images show construction on Egypt's border. And India opposition party claims bank accounts frozen. That concludes this bulletin of world news, and we now take a look at development news. The government has formulated a three-pronged concessional debt restructuring package to repay the $36 billion foreign debt, which has not been paid at the moment. Transport, Highways and Mass Media Minister Dr. Bandulu Gunawardena said that it is planned to implement this three-pronged package for 5 to 6 years, 6 to 20 years and beyond 20 years. The government of Sri Lanka was working to obtain a grace period for the repayment of these loans with the support of foreign creditors in the recent past. Several rounds of negotiations have been successfully held so far to reach an agreement to obtain the grace period. If these agreements can be obtained, the government will have to repay 37% of the foreign debt within 5 to 6 years. That came to you in development news.
Moving on with sports news.
The first T20 international match between Afghanistan and Sri Lanka will be played today. The match will be played at the Dambulla International Cricket Stadium, and the match will commence at 7:15 p.m. That's sports news. We take a look at business news next.
Go ekakthiyana youth eකට life එකේ change එකට නියමෙට set වෙන්න ඇස් වහගෙන දැකපු හින හැබැයි කරන්න youth එකට නියමෙට set වෙන්න friendship එක මෙන්න.
The all-new NSB Ithru Mithru account, NSB IM, a plan for your dream.
Business News, sponsored by National Savings Bank, the safest place for your money.
Sri Lankan Cargo and Cargo One yesterday unveiled an exciting global partnership to bring the Sri Lankan national carrier's cargo capacity to the leading platform for digital air cargo bookings. Comprising its very first digital sales channel for air cargo, Cargo One will soon deliver its user-friendly and efficient booking platform for all Sri Lankan Cargo's global offers. The addition of Sri Lankan Cargo services further adds to Cargo One's renowned depth and diversity of supply options. The deal reflects Cargo One's ability to deliver airlines a first-class digital sales channel with a broad and competitive presence in all relevant markets. That's business news, economic news up next.
Business News, sponsored by National Savings Bank, the safest place for your money.
Go ekakthiyana youth එකට life එකේ change එකට නියමෙට set වෙන්න ඇස් වහගෙන දැකපු හින හැබැයි කරන්න youth එකට නියමෙට set වෙන්න friendship එක මෙන්න.
The all-new NSB Ithru Mithru account, NSB IM, a plan for your dream.
On to economic news. Indonesia and Sri Lanka will launch negotiations for a bilateral trade agreement. This was revealed by the Indonesian ambassador to Sri Lanka, Dewi Gustina Tobing, at the bilateral trade and investment discussion between Sri Lanka and Indonesia, organised by the National Chamber of Commerce Sri Lanka, held at the National Chamber's auditorium yesterday. She also mentioned the importance of working together to increase bilateral trade between the two countries. That's economic news.
Weather report.
Several spells of light showers will occur in the eastern and Uva provinces, also in the Polonnaruwa, Matale and Nuwara districts. Showers or thundershowers may occur at a few places in the western and Sabrangama provinces, also in the Gaul and Matara districts after 2 p.m. Fairly strong winds, about 30 to 40 kilometers per hour, can be expected at times in the eastern slopes of the central hills and also in the northern, north-central, northwestern, Uva and the eastern provinces and in the Hambantota and Kandy districts. To conclude this bulletin of news, a recap of the headlines. Israel and Sri Lanka have inked a direct air service agreement. The central bank says Sri Lanka's inflation expected to hit 5% in the medium term. It is stressed that the new economic reforms are politically unpopular but vital for future prosperity. Parliament to meet 3 days next week. The unethical professional conduct is vehemently denounced. Democrats relieved as Manchin rules out White House bid. And the first T20 international between Afghanistan and Sri Lanka will be played today. On that note, we conclude this morning's news broadcast. And on this lovely Saturday morning, it's back to your host, Sanal P, to keep you well entertained with this super collection of music. Good morning, Sanal, and it's all yours.